Welcome. This video is documenting the prediction that President Trump's interview with Meet the Press in a barn in Wisconsin during an intense rainstorm is pointing to the prediction that there will be a 13% loss in one day in the stock market on June 15th, and that U.S. warships, specifically aircraft carriers, will be sunk on July 26th, and that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash along with Gavin Newsom, the two predicted running mates for the Democrat Party in 2028, on August 2nd, 2028. And as a result, the Democrat Party will nominate Michelle and Barack Obama in an emergency, and the election on November 7th, 2028 will be stolen. That's correct. And I will explain how this is known, and it'll be mind-blowing. But this is the reason why in the interview, Trump left the interview after telling the interviewer that she and her network are corrupt for not covering the corruption in the prior shoplifted referendum. Okay, you know what I'm talking about? All right, so these are the predictions. We have 4 predictions here that are being made, and the date that this video is posted proves that this prediction, first of all, for the 13% loss in one day in the stock market, is being made ahead of time. As we can see here also, this email documents that it is composed on June 7th. So that is 8 days prior to June 15th, the date of the predicted stock market crash. That's not to say that the stock market hasn't already begun crashing. That's also a prediction. The stock market peaked on June 2nd, and it was recognized on June 2nd that it would be the peak and beginning of the biggest crash in all of history. That's another prediction that's being made here. Anyway, if you are skeptical for some reason, email me and I'll forward this email to you that documents that this prediction, along with the reasons for how this prediction is known ahead of time, which I will explain, was known prior to the predictions. Now, these predictions are precise and there's no way to mistake them. Obviously, when they come to pass, it'll prove what I am saying in this video. But what will also prove what I am saying in this video are these reasons. In other words, I'm going to provide the most astounding, profound reasons you could imagine that inform us how these predictions are known ahead of time. And as you will clearly see, these reasons could not have been concocted in the imagination of a human being. They are clearly from God. And so if you are a delusional agnostic atheist, a hardcore fundamentalist agnostic atheist, and you have told yourself that I must have somehow changed the date of the post date of the video, and somehow through connections with Google change the date of this email, well, you are crazy, to put it mildly. But if you were so irrational, that's not even the correct word, but if you actually thought that, well, these reasons here will further confirm for you that all of this information, these predictions, are from God. Now let's talk about the purpose of these predictions. one, the purpose of these predictions, yes, is to prove the righteous Christian God of the Bible. Okay, but there is already an overwhelming amount of evidence for the righteous Christian God of the Bible. The further reason for God doing or making these predictions is to prove to you all of the controversial things that I will be saying in this video. And believe me, I know far better than you or anyone the reason and purpose for these predictions that are from God. Make no mistake. God has given me a voice through these predictions in order to prove to you the controversial things that I will be saying. There is zero debate regarding these things. And this will all be proven to be true when these predictions come to pass, which is the purpose of these predictions. Hopefully that's clear enough. And these controversial things that I'll be saying aren't really that controversial, but at the same time they are for a large number of people regarding the individual things. Depending on the individual thing that I'll be talking about, there are many people out there that really don't know these things because of the age of deception that we live in. Because the ruler of this world, according to the biblical worldview, which will be proven to be true when these predictions come to pass, is that Satan, the deceiver, is the ruler of this world. And that's why there's so much deception, and why these obvious, easy-to-know things aren't known. But it'll all be proven to be true with these predictions, and that is the purpose of what's going on here. Now, to not appreciate this is to miss entirely the point of these predictions. The point and purpose of these predictions is not for you to go, oh, cool, neat. You were able to know these things ahead of time. Or if you are a quote-unquote Christian, it is not for you to go, oh, cool. God was able to let us know these things ahead of time. No, that is not the purpose of these predictions. Again, the purpose of these predictions is to prove the controversial things that I'll be saying in this video. And so let's get into it. So this link here is to a news story regarding a sports game. Many of you will be like, well, wait a second, God uses sports for prophetic signs? Well, you have no idea. Yes, specifically American sports, which I'll just go off to explain that for a second here. Some people ask me, well, why are you so focused on America? Well, the reason why is because God is. America is God's Gentile nation. It is God's chosen nation. It is un-Israel. And that's why God is communicating warning of judgment for his nation, because judgment is commensurate with the amount of light and blessings the nation or individual has received. Anyway, sports, because it provides so much opportunity for God to communicate things, from the numbers, through statistics, through the mascots, through the cities, through the players themselves, and the events of the game. It's just amazing. And to be frank, the person to be able to understand God's prophetic signs, his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, must be someone familiar with American sports. There's no way around that. And I was blessed to have a father who was a sports spectator. I wasn't in my adult years, but I grew up with that. And I understand these things in sports, spectator sports, American games. It's so important. And this is just one example. We have here this fastest ever pitch thrown by a starting pitcher. God uses records for signs in general. Okay? God uses records for prophetic signs. On June 7th, the day of Trump's or trumpets, because Trump is God's trumpet, trumpeting prophetic signs. On the day of Trumpet's interview in Wisconsin, this pitcher named Jacob Mizorowski of the team from Wisconsin threw the fastest pitch ever recorded by a starting pitcher. Okay, so first of all, Trump's interview that we'll be talking about here was in Wisconsin. Okay, and then we have this sign involving the pitcher for the team from Wisconsin, the Milwaukee Brewers. So he threw the fastest pitch ever, and besides the fastest pitch ever, the main highlight of his performance was when he stared at his manager in the dugout from the pitching mound in the 7th inning to let him know he did not want to be removed from the game. Because if you don't know baseball, for a starting pitcher to pitch 7 innings is it's an achievement. It's not often that happens. This guy is one of the top pitchers in the entire league. Anyway, it was quite something. You can see a video of this, the way he stared down his manager and said, no, so full of confidence, it's unreal. And why it's amazing is because he then proceeded to strike out the next 2 batters and get out of the inning to finish the 7th inning. He struck out the next 2 batters in the 7th inning with 7 pitches. So, as I wrote, he proceeded to then strike out the next 2 batters with 7 pitches to end the 7th inning. His team scored 7 runs in the game, and the pitcher earned his 7th win with the game. It was the ultimate cockiness, right? He just stared at, no, I'm not leaving the game. I'm finished. It's quite something, which made the highlights. Okay, so the rocket throwers, and this is the adjective the article uses, the rocket throwers, quote unquote, 7th win is 7 times 7 days before it is predicted that rockets will sink U.S. warships on July 26th, 2026. Okay, so we have the highlight of when he told his manager, no, there's no way you're taking me out of the game. And then him finishing this 7th inning with 7 more pitches to strike out both of the batters to give him his 7th win, in which his team scored 7 runs, exactly 7 times 7 days before the predicted rockets, as in his pitch and pitching, will sink U.S. warships. On the day of Trumpet's interview in Wisconsin, the team from Wisconsin won 7-1. In his last 7 appearances, the pitcher has given up 1 earned run. 71, which is obviously what's hinted at here, is equal to the 9 plus 11th prime number. The predicted sinking of U.S. warships will be warning of judgment like 9/11. The big warning of judgment for America. This will be like a 9/11. And that's why the 9/11 hinted at with this game. The flood judgment was warned of 7 days ahead of time in Genesis 7:4. The U.S. warships judgment will be 7 times 7 days, or 7 weeks, after the pitcher's performance in the 7th inning, when the pitcher went through the other team's batting lineup for the 4th time, as in Genesis 7:4. The pitcher has pitched 7 innings in 4 of his recent games. The Wisconsin team's pitcher went through the batting order 4 times in 7 innings, and in 4 starts pitched 7 innings. On the same day, the 47th president's rain-plagued interview in Wisconsin, Genesis 7:4. Rain-plagued, the flood began in Genesis 7:4. Okay, so I'll just repeat this. The Wisconsin team's pitcher went through the batting order 4 times in his 7 innings of pitching. And in his 4 starts, he has pitched 7 innings. And on this same day, the 47th president's rain-plagued interview in Wisconsin, as in Genesis 7:4, flood. The flood began in Genesis 7:11. With this game, the pitcher's record is 7-1-1, 2 losses, which hints at 7:11, because the 2 is divided into 1 plus 1. Pitchers on the pitching mound symbolize the Antichrist on the Temple Mount in God's prophetic signs. Like countless times this is the case. Pitchers on the pitching mound symbolize the Antichrist on the Temple Mount in Bible prophecy. The rocket-throwing pitcher threw the fastest pitch on the same day that Iran fired rocket missiles at Israel for the first time since the ceasefire. The pitcher wears number 32. 32 is the equivalent of the word bomb in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. The pitcher pitched 8 strikeouts, 80 days, before it is predicted that Israel will fire a rocket missile nuke that will bomb Iran. This will lead to Israel rebuilding the temple on the Temple Mount. Okay? So, again, we've got the rocket-throwing pitcher, and he threw the fastest pitch, which confirms that he is the rocket-throwing pitcher. And this was the same day that rocket missiles were launched at Israel for the first time from Iran since the ceasefire. It was the news of the day. And this pitcher wears number 32, which is astounding because this hints at bomb. All right, now the pitcher threw 8 strikeouts, which is an achievement in a game. And this game is 80 days before it is predicted that Israel will fire rocket missile nukes, or 1 nuke at Iran. I forgot to put this in the heading up here. Yeah. This prediction for the nuking of Iran. That's all right. There'll be plenty more videos with other titles. And anyway, you're learning about it right now anyway. There'll be plenty more videos explaining plethora of other reasons for how August 26th, 2026 will be the day that Israel will nuke bomb Iran. I didn't even remember to put the date into this paragraph. Okay. The Antichrist on the Temple Mount will be the 44th president. Again, pitchers on the pitching mound symbolize the Antichrist on the Temple Mount. Obama, the name Obama, is equal to 32 in simple English gematria, just as bomb is. Number 32 pitched 4 plus 4 strikeouts, as in the 44th president, and the game was in the Four Corners state with 4 corners, Colorado, and this game is 40 plus 40 days before Israel will nuke bomb Iran. Bomb equals 32. Pitcher number 32, Obama, Antichrist on the Temple Mount. And again, as a result of this nuking of Iran, Israel is predicted to rebuild the temple on the Temple Mount, where the Antichrist will be. On the day of Trumpet's interview in Wisconsin, that was in a severe Midwest rainstorm, number 32 for the Wisconsin team threw the fastest pitch exactly 32 months. Exactly. After J.D. Vance confronted Kamala Harris at her airplane in Wisconsin on August 7th, 2024. Okay? Now, obviously, for me anyway, that was recognized back then to be a very important prophetic sign. Because not only was it the story of the day, but it was a major coincidence. Because both of their campaign planes landed at this small airport in Wisconsin on their campaign rally tours. And so because of the coincidence and the timing, J.D. Vance being on the tarmac a few days after having been appointed by Trump to be his vice president, one of the first things J.D. Vance did was walk over to Kamala Harris to talk to her as she was deboarding her plane. Her, along with her vice presidential candidate, Tim Walz, which hinted at walls of security collapsing in God's judgment, this theme in the Bible and in God's signs. So this was a major sign. This was like something very interesting in itself, but it was also a prophetic sign. So again, this all happened in Wisconsin. Now, it just so happens that exactly 32 months later, because it happened on August 7th, exactly 32 months later on June 7th, we have this picture number 32 for the team from Wisconsin in a prophetic sign. And this was the day that Trumpet, as in J.D. Vance, was doing his interview in Wisconsin, which became a major prophetic sign when he walked out of the interview. He took off the mic and said something like, I don't know what he said on his way out. He left the interview early because he was tired of arguing with the interviewer, and rightly so. He is the alpha male. He is a hero for doing what he did and confronting and trumpeting and calling out the corruption in the interviewer and her network, as he told her. And as he told her, you're either corrupt or you're stupid. But the truth is, it's all spiritual. And the truth is not quite that she's stupid, but more so that she's corrupt. But her corruption is spiritual. The people on the left, the people in the Democrat Party, the agnostic atheists, the secularists, they are corrupt. But they're corrupted, they don't know it. They don't understand that reality is spiritual. It's all spiritual. Everything that's playing out is all symbolism. Especially when Trump, God's trumpet, in a prophetic sign, tells her about the corruption in the election, which she responds with, well, there's no evidence for the corruption or there's no evidence for the cheating in the election, when, of course, there's an overwhelming amount of evidence, which is why Trump calls her out for being either corrupt or stupid. And her networks were being corrupt, okay? Do you remember what I said at the beginning of this video? I am saying these predictions will prove the controversial things that I am saying. If you somehow didn't know, because you are corrupted spiritually, you are blinded, because you hate God's people. I mean, that's what it all comes down to. Let me get to the bottom line after that. Because you hate Trump, that you are so blinded by your hatred to not bother to look into or listen to or receive the information that the other half of the nation is trying to tell you, but you cannot hear because you only listen to your left propaganda media, the mainstream media. If you somehow didn't know that the 2020 referendum was shoplifted, now you know. That's the purpose of this prediction. Okay? Now it is time for you to finally wake up and stop your bigotry and your hatred for Trump and conservatives and true Christians. because Christians on the left is an oxymoron. There's no such thing as a leftist progressive Christian. That's all part of the deception, incidentally. The fact that you would even think such a thing. And so, what it really comes down to is that it's all spiritual, and we're in, or there is a war going on for your soul. There's a battle going on between good and evil for people's souls. And the people who have this hatred for Trump, they think that they are righteous. And that's why they have their hatred for Trump, because they think that they are better than other people. They think that they are morally superior to those, as Hillary Clinton put it, deplorables, those Christian right-wingers, those Trumpers. But the opposite is the truth. I'm not even going to say to you that, well, both sides are this or that. No, the opposite is the truth in general. The truth is being spoken through Trump's mouth when he says to her that she is corrupt or stupid about the 2020 shoplifted referendum and everything else. And I mean everything else. And as Trump said when he departed the interview, that's it. I've had enough. I understand that sentiment. I have had enough. And if we have had enough, Trump and I and all of those that are with Trump, God has certainly had enough. That's what God is communicating. God is saying through Trump that he has had enough. That's why the judgment destruction is coming, which is symbolized through these predictions, through, for example, the 13% loss in the stock market prediction, and the prediction for the sinking of the U.S. warships, and the return of Barack Obama through the plane crash of Kamala Harris, etc. This destruction of America through the Antichrist, through the left's savior, Barack Obama, is judgment. It's evil. It's wicked. I'm trying to help you. You need to wake up and you need to stop your bigotry. There are two camps, those who hate evil and those who hate evil. And that's today's left. It's as simple as that. They hate those who hate evil. They can't stand it because they're spiritually aligned with Satan. So, there's so much more amazing things to say here, though. I actually got ahead of myself here with all of that. Wait till you hear what I have to say with what God has shown us through these signs here. I'm just getting started. All right. So, as I was saying, on the day of Trump's interview in Wisconsin, a severe Midwest rainstorm, number 32 for the Wisconsin team threw the fastest pitch exactly 32 months after J.D. Vance confronted Kamala Harris at her airplane in Wisconsin. The pitcher pitched 7 innings and 8 strikeouts for his 7th win. And this is 787 days before it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash into a Major League Baseball stadium in the Midwest due to a severe Midwest rainstorm on August 2nd, 2028. That's the amazing reason for this J.D. Vance confrontation with Kamala Harris as she deboarded her plane, but of course refused to talk to J.D. Vance, because that's what the left does. They are not capable of winning arguments or debates, so they shut them down. This is actually very symbolic, how she ignored Vance on the tarmac after she got out of her plane and continued on to her rally where she could speak to the choir instead of talking about issues. But whatever. I mean, that's what high-level campaign candidates do. So anyway, it's just symbolism anyway for how what the left does is not deal with the issues, but because they feel entitled through what they feel to be moral superiority, shut down any kind of debate. There's no reason for debate if you know that you are morally superior than the other. And that's why ultimately the left is worshiping a false god. It's a false religion. Everyone has a religion, and for the left, their religion is politics. And this is what gives them their meaning in life. These issues, such as Trump. But what they fail to realize is that because their God is not the God of the Bible, their false religion is anti-God. It's how it has to be. As Jesus said, you're either with me or against me. There's no in between. And so they aren't with the God of the Bible, and that's why all of their politics is actually the opposite of the truth and opposite of righteousness, and it's all a lie, and that's why they love it. They love the lies. It's like spiritual, like I'm saying. It's unconscious. It's spiritual. They gravitate like moths to a bright light. They are just attracted to the lies. They love it because of their hatred. And it's all rooted not in hatred of Trump. Underneath all of that is their hatred of God. And that brings us to the purpose of life, which is a decision as to whether or not they wish to be with God forever or not. So, her death, along with Gavin Newsom's predicted death in the same crash, will lead to the 44th president becoming the president again, number 32, through 4 plus 4 strikeouts. And again, Obama is equal to 32 in simple English gematria. Harris and Newsom are predicted to be flying from Trump's predicted funeral in Washington to Los Angeles on the date of their crash, August 2nd, 2028. June 7th, 2026. On June 7th, 2026, Trump was arguing with the interviewer about the 2020 shoplifted referendum and how the referendum in Los Angeles was being shoplifted as they spoke after 4 days of counting the votes. To which the interviewer astoundingly tried to justify. But if you're so dumb that you don't, or I should say ignorant, uninformed, as you don't know what's going on in America these days and the pattern here, this is this part of this pattern of stealing, of shoplifting referendums all over in the blue cities. Okay, this is what happens, right? I mean, the referendum in 2020 was shoplifted through the blue cities, through the corruption, through the machines, the Democrat machine apparatus that is that are dictatorships in these blue cities. And all, of course, dictatorships lead to corruption. The pitcher went through the batting order 4 times, pitched 4 plus 4 strikeouts in 7 innings, and in 4 recent starts, pitched 7 innings. That's just to give you more 44s here, and to support this 4 days at the time of Trump's interview of counting votes, which amazingly the interviewer tried to justify. Why? Because she's a Democrat or a Democrat. But again, Democrat doesn't really do it. It's just spiritual corruption. On the day of the rocket throwing pitcher on the pitching mound's fastest pitch, Iran fired. Okay, so again, pitchers on the pitching mound symbolize the Antichrist on the Temple Mount. So on the day of the rocket throwing pitcher on the pitching mound's fastest pitch, Iran fired rockets at Israel on the 59th anniversary of the Jews capturing the Temple Mount. That's amazing. So on this anniversary of this extremely important date, the second most important date in modern Israel's history, June 7th, 1967, when the Jews captured the Temple Mount in the Six-Day War, this pitcher on the pitching mound was the prophetic sign. That's just amazing in itself. Now, both temples in Israel's ancient history, both temples on the Temple Mount, were destroyed on the date 5/9 in the Hebrew calendar, the 9th of Av, the 9th day of the 5th month. And that's why on this 59th anniversary, we have the pitcher on the pitching mound sign. But on the same day as the 59th anniversary, I'm just going to jump ahead. The election we're talking about is the 59th presidential election, the 2021. Okay? Now, on the same day as the 59th anniversary, the 59-year-old three-time NBA Finals champion Chicago Bulls player died. 3 times hints at the upcoming predicted rebuilding of the temple, the third temple on the Temple Mount. That's why this 59-year-old Chicago Bulls player won 3 championships with the Chicago Bulls. And why he died at 59 on the 59th anniversary, because of the third temple here. Also on this day, and we're talking about the pitcher on the pitching mound symbolizing the Antichrist on the Temple Mount, which is the president, as in presidential election, from Chicago. Now, also on this day, Trump argued, as in storm, okay? He argued in a storm, but the argument itself is symbolic of a storm. And he didn't really storm off the interview like a child. He calmly put down the microphone and touched her lightly on the shoulder and, said something like, "Good luck to you, I've had enough," or whatever, right? So on this day, Trump argued, which is symbolic of a storm, with the Meet the Press interviewer and told her that she and her network are corrupt for not reporting on the corruption in the 59th shoplifted referendum, presidential referendum. This interview was 587 days after the stolen 59th presidential referendum. Flight 587, as in the 587 days, crashed into Queens, New York City, where Trump was born. The number 9 from the Bible is symbolism for God's judgment. It is the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. The shoplifted 59th presidential election was exactly 999 weeks after the warning of judgment on 9/11. As in the warning of judgment, as in number 9. 999 weeks exactly to the 59th shoplifted referendum, presidential, from 9/11. And Trump, incidentally, or not incidentally, is a 9/11 sign, because on 9/11, Trump called into Channel 9 News, the local TV news station, and had a conversation with the anchors at Channel 9 News. And he inadvertently trumpeted his tower on Wall Street and how it had become the tallest tower in Lower Manhattan. And that was after the 110 stories of the Twin Towers collapsed. In the Bible, the walls, as in Wall Street, of security collapsed in God's judgment after the Israelites, led by Joshua, blew trumpets, and and Joshua died at the age of 110, as in the 110 stories that collapsed, as in Wall Street collapsing, or rather, I should say, the walls of security collapsing in Trump's tower on Wall Street. Now, so Trump is a 9/11 sign, and exactly 999 weeks after 9/11 and the Trump sign with Channel 9 News, you know what? Trump called into Channel 9 News on 9/11, exactly 999 weeks before the shoplifted referendum. That alone should be enough for the wise person to recognize as proof from God that the referendum was shoplifted. That's really enough. Oh, you know what I forgot to put into this paragraph also is on the, well, never mind. No, that's something else. Well, actually, 99 weeks after the shoplifted referendum was the closest conjunction of Jupiter with Earth in 59 years. That's another thing, though. And the day of the NASA probe hitting the double asteroid, as in the two towers, and that was also the same day that the two gas pipelines in the Nord Stream were blown up by the U.S. military. Okay, that's another, I just threw that in there. Now, but back to what I was saying. 999 weeks after Trump called into Channel 9 News was the shoplifted referendum, the 59th presidential referendum. Okay? And again, 587 days after that is Trump's interview arguing about the shoplifted referendum. Okay? Now, the shoplifted presidential referendum was 9 times 110 weeks after Flight 587 crashed in Queens with a crew of 9 people just days after 9/11. Obviously, 9 times 110 weeks hints at 9/11. So that confirms the connection to 9/11. Because if you recall, when the plane crashed into Queens, at first, everyone was like shocked and concerned that what had just happened was related to terrorism because it happened just days after 9/11, which was, of course, in New York City where Queens is. Okay, so anyway, from the Queens crash after 9/11, we have this 9 times 110 weeks connection, which hints at 9/11. 2, the shoplifted referendum. Okay? Now, Flight 587 crashed 8 weeks and 5 days after 9/11, when the 4th hijacked plane crashed with 44 people at a 40-degree angle into a 40-acre pit, 40 plus 40 miles outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The 44th president dwelled at 4 times 400 Pennsylvania Avenue. Flight 587 crashed 8 weeks and 5 days after Flight 77, which hints at Flight 587. Flew into the Pentagon on 9/11, right? 8 weeks and 5 days after Flight 77 on 9/11, right? That hints at 587. Flight 587. God uses records for signs. Flight 587 was the second deadliest aviation disaster in U.S. history after Flight 191, which hints at 9/11. which was in Chicago at O'Hare Airport. The 58th, as in Flight 587, and 8 weeks and 5 days after 9/11, the 58th prime number of people died in Flight 191 when it crashed in Chicago. So you see what I'm getting at here? I'm saying that 9/11 pointed to the president from Chicago, right? Because the fourth plane that was hijacked killed 44 people, right? Now, I'm also saying that Flight 587 actually pointed to the 44th president also, who is from Chicago, because it was the second deadliest plane crash since the plane crash in Chicago, which hinted at 9/11 because it was Flight 191. But it was also the 58th prime number of people died, and the Queen's crash of Flight 587 was 8 weeks and 5 days after 9/11. Now, Flight 191 in Chicago had a crew of 13 people. Obama moved to Chicago in 85, as in Flight 587, 8 weeks and 5 days after 9/11, to begin his political career where he represented the 13th District, as in the crew of 13 on Flight 191 in Chicago. He represented the 13th District in the state Senate. Obama was 34 years old when he moved to Chicago. The 59-year-old Chicago Bulls player who died on the 59th anniversary of the Temple Mount wore number 34. Right? Because again, this player number 34 died 587 days after the shoplifted referendum, which connects to the Queen's crash, which points to the plane crash in Chicago, where Obama moved to at the age of 34. Right? So you get it all, right? The predicted deaths of Harris and Newsom in a plane crash into a baseball stadium will lead the way to the return of the president from Chicago to the White House. That's why all the plane crashes here. On 9/11, first of all, and then Flight 587 and Flight 191 in Chicago. All of the Antichrist's rise will be the result of a plane crash. By the way, the flights on 9/11 were on their way to Los Angeles, just like Kamala Harris's plane crash is predicted to be on its way to Los Angeles from the East Coast, from Washington, just like Flight 77. And for that matter, 7 times 7 is 49. Harris was the 49th vice president. Speaking of which, Michelle Obama will be the 49th president. And Barack, her vice president, are predicted to shoplift the 60... Am I jumping ahead? Okay, let me see. No, okay, Michelle and Barack are predicted to shoplift the 61st presidential election on November 7th, 2028. Exactly 9 plus 10 plus 10 months, which hints at 9/11. After trumpeted about shoplifted referendums. Trumpet's trumpet about shoplifted referendums was 587 days after the shoplifted referendum in 2020, and Flight 587 crashed in Queens, where Trump was born, 61 days after 9/11. In other words, way back when the planes crashed on 9/11 and 61 days later in Queens, pointed to the 61st shoplifted referendum and the rise of the Antichrist through a plane crash. Do you know how profound this paragraph is? Do you know how important this video is? I hope so. If you are a Christian, make sure you never ever stop sharing this link to this video, or if not, a link to another video on this channel. It is a massive bag of gold, And Jesus warned what happens to those who do not use their bags of gold. I also recommend not just copying and pasting the link, but put in a unique sentence frequently, because the algorithm will otherwise pick it up and you'll be dinged for spam. So just don't do that. Just change, a little bit of a sentence to introduce the link to the article frequently enough, Don't just copy paste it 100 times, But do that 100 times, just don't do the exact same thing every time. Anyway, so, which hinted at, okay, so I was saying here the 61 days between the plane crashes in the latter half of 2001 hinted at the predicted shoplifted 61st presidential election, which will be exactly 9 plus 10 plus 10 months after Trump trumpeted about shoplifted referendums. The other highlight in this game, involving the pitcher for the Wisconsin team on the day of Trump's interview in Wisconsin, is that he hit batter Tyler Freeman in the head with a 98 mile per hour fastball. Freeman hints at American. Tyler is part of this pattern that God is using to point to ancient Tyre and its security of the ocean. The reason why is that ancient Tyre in Old Testament Bible prophecy is actually symbolism for America. There are people out there who say and believe that America is not in Bible prophecy. It couldn't be further from the truth. America is very important in prophecy, as we would expect. And one of the ways, and a primary way, is this symbolism of ancient Tyre. Now, ancient Tyre was a very successful city-state for a long time and evaded enemies until finally Alexander the Great built a causeway from the mainland over to the island where Tyre was. Because up until then, Tyre was protected with the ocean, gave it natural protection, which is the same as America. God set apart, first of all, Great Britain for his purposes from the rest of Europe through its protection of the ocean, which gave it ultimately the ability to become the naval power that it became, and also birthed culturally America, which is the obvious big example of this, with America being protected by oceans on 3 of its coasts. I should say North America, because Canada isn't a nation. Trump is correct. It is the 51st state. It's the freeloading state that wouldn't exist if it weren't for America. And nations aren't nations unless they can exist on their own. Anyway, the point is, God set apart America for his purposes also, and mainly that is, it was the vehicle through which God spread the gospel around the world through America and the other English-speaking nations that were also blessed like America, including Canada and Australia, throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. Now these nations have turned away from God, and they're in the process of being destroyed. So that's why Tyler, anyway, so this guy Tyler was hit in the head. Now, Tyler wears number 2. This since that's the second 9/11 judgment for America that will be on the ocean with the sinking of the warships. And that's predicted to occur exactly 7 weeks after the interview in the 30th state and the pitcher's game for the 30th state's team, which hints at 3 sets of 7. which is what the Israelites enacted symbolically before the walls of security collapsed on Jericho in God's judgment. And in that 3 sets of 7 included 7 trumpets. I should say trumpets. Which is why Trumpet called into Channel 9 News and talked about Wall Street, or pointed to Wall Street as in the walls of security collapsing after the trumpets. The fastest ever pitch by a starting pitcher was thrown at 103 miles per hour. The pitcher threw 8 strikeouts. This 103 miles per hour pitch and 8 strikeouts, and the player who was hit in the head and as a result left the game, hints at the predicted 13%, as in 103 miles per hour, loss in one day in the stock market, 8 days, as in 8 strikeouts, after this game. The predicted loss being on June 15th. So again, 103 hints at 13. So the 8 strikeouts and the 103 miles per hour pitch hints at 8 days after this being the day of the 13% stock market loss in one day. The pitcher's name is Mizorowski. This hints at the predicted plane crash into a baseball stadium in Missouri. And that would be it for this video. God bless. Flight 587 hints at the 5th through 8th king's prophecy and the 7th king in the prophecy, who is Trump. Okay, so there's this parallel with the 5th through 8th king's prophecy in the book of Revelation. And this parallel, which is a secondary fulfillment, not the primary fulfillment of this prophecy, is the 7 presidents beginning in the year 77 with Jimmy Carter, making Trump the 7th in this series of 7 presidents. That is a parallel with this 5th through 8th king's prophecy. That's the reason why the Flight 587 prophetic sign. This is why Flight 587 crashed into Queens, as in the 5th through 8th king's prophecy, in which the 7th one is Trump, who was born in Queens. Okay? The Flight 587 that crashed into Queens hints at the 5th through 8th king's prophecy and the 7th king in that prophecy who was born in Queens. 587. Queens also hints at the 5th through king's prophecy and the 7th king. This is also why on the same day that Flight 587 crashed in New York, the New Jersey State Lotto, for the first time ever, held 2 pick 3 lottos in the same day. Prior to that, they had 1 pick 3 lotto per day. I should have written here the 3rd state. So it's the 3rd state, New Jersey, had 2 pick 3 lottos in the same day. For the first time, on the day that Flight 587 crashed. The numbers in the 2 lottos were 587 and 578. And this was the day that Flight 587 crashed into Queens, as in the 5th through 8th kings and the 7th king. In fact, 578, which was the other lotto number that day, the second one of the 2, that's the 5th and 7th and 8th kings. Chronologically in order there. 587 hints at the 5th through 8th king's prophecy and the 7th one in that prophecy. And by the way, this isn't the first time that God has used the number 85 or 58 to hint at the 5th through 8th king's prophecy. So there's this pattern already established before this recognition here. Now we know why. It was to point, now we know why the two lotto numbers coincided with the Flight 587 crash. It really was a mystery until today. I mean, I wrote this morning. All of this was downloaded in my mind this morning. It's all finally cleared up. I'm just getting started too with Flight 587 here. And again, the reason why I'm going through this is because Trump's stormy interview, in which he stormed out during a rainstorm, was 587 days after, and the argument in the interview was about the shoplifted referendum in 2020, and the interview was 587 days after the shoplifted referendum. Okay, so now we know. It was to point Flight 587, way back in 2001, right after 9/11. It was to point to the 7th king in the 5th through 8th king's prophecy. Now, why would God point to the 7th king, Trump? Because Trump is God's trumpet, who is trumpeting essentially the end times and the Antichrist, who will follow Trump. The 6th and 8th kings in the prophecy. As the prophecy says, the 6th king, well, let me just read it. First of all, the prophecy is specifically Revelation 17:9, and that's because this prophecy is pointing to, in a secondary fulfillment to the primary fulfillment, the president, one of the kings, who was president from 09 until 17. The 7th king in this prophecy became president in the year 2017. Okay, so, but to give the context here, I'll just start from verse 8. The beast that you saw, that was and is not, and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. Okay, so this beast represents the Antichrist. And the dwellers on earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will and by the way, that does not prove predestination. That's an incorrect way to read that. That's another subject, though. Okay, the Calvinists and the Reformed theologians are incorrect. It is the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day. Okay, so, and the dwellers on earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will marvel to see the beast. When it says from the foundation of the world, it means that God had this plan from the foundation of the world. Not that actually God knew ahead of time, before the people were even born, whether they would be going to hell or heaven, or written in the book of life. To claim such a preposterous idea is to make God essentially evil, because it also means he created all of the evil as well, or he intended it. Okay, so it's abhorrent, the idea that God predestined people before they were even born to go to hell. No, they were given free will, and although God knows all possibilities, he does not know what people will decide. And if he did, we wouldn't have free will. Okay. The omniscient idea is a Greek idea. It's not in the Bible. There are plenty of things or instances where God does not know something and also changed his mind, etc. Okay, I really got off track there, but So the beast that was and is not and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. Okay? So we have this beast that was and is not and then will come again. Okay? That is an allusion to Barack Obama, who was the president, is currently not the president during the period of the seventh king, Trump, and will be the president again. That's why this is a secondary fulfillment. The primary fulfillment is Rome's temporal powers. Because prior to Napoleon's general stripping Rome of its temporal powers, it had temporal powers over the Western Empire, but it was stripped of that, and then it's about to receive these temporal powers along with its religious powers once again. Once again, Rome will be the capital of Europe. And in a way, the capital of the world. Okay, so that's the primary fulfillment. But okay, so, and the dwellers on earth whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world will marvel to see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. In both cases, again, Rome and Obama, was, is not, and is to come. This calls for a mind of wisdom, and that's why people will marvel. People will marvel again when Obama becomes the president again. People will marvel when Rome becomes the capital of the world again. They'll be, wow. And that's exactly what's being described in this prophecy. So this calls for a mind of wisdom. Okay, those who are wise will know this, what I just said. And from this, to confirm what I just said, the seven heads of the beast, representative of the Antichrist, and when I refer to the Antichrist here, I'm talking about Rome, and the seven mountains, the seven heads are seven mountains. Rome is known for its seven hills. Rome is the city of seven hills. That's its nickname. It's known for this. And, of course, this book, the book of Revelation, was written in the time of the height of the Roman Empire. There's no getting around how this was clearly a prophecy about Rome, the city of seven hills. And it's on which the woman is seated. Now, the woman is the Pope. The seat is Rome. Now, they were also, these seven heads are also symbolic of seven kings. Now, Rome was founded, and this is another way we know that we're talking about Rome, because Rome was literally founded after a series of seven kings. I mean, Rome is known for having the seven kings right before its founding. Right? So, it's the city of seven kings, Rome. So these seven heads of the beast are also seven kings. Now this is all symbolism. 5 of whom have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. By the way, people will marvel at Pope Francis's resurrection, which is predicted. Because he is, in that sense, another example of a was, is not, and will be again. He will be the Bishop of Rome once again, after he is resurrected on May 2nd, 2029. Okay, so back to what I was saying here. These are also the 7 kings, 5 of whom have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. That's also Obama. And when he does come, he must remain only a little while. Well, in the case of Barack Obama and Pope Francis, their returns, their once agains, will be in the early part of 2029. Well, Barack Obama and Michelle Obama will be elected in November of 2028 through a shoplifted referendum. But they will return to the White House on January 20th, 2029. And Barack Obama specifically will become the president again when Michelle Obama is predicted to step down on June 17th, 2029. Okay, so as for the beast that was and is not, it is an eighth, but it belongs to the seven and goes to destruction. Okay, so Pope Francis is one of the, is of Rome, which is founded on seven kings, founded after seven kings, and Obama is the eighth king, and he was the sixth king, right? And it's all symbolism. Of course, we had Biden in there in the middle, but really, Biden was a puppet installed by the Barack Obama regime, the leftover Obama installed regime in government that orchestrated the coup in 2020. So Biden really is Obama anyway, but it's all symbolism anyway. So we're going to have the eighth king following the seventh king, which is Trump. Okay, so there you have it. That's that prophecy. So I just wanted to give you that. Now let's get back to what I was saying. So 587, Flight 587 is hinting at all of this, including on the same day as Flight 587's crash into Queens, as in Kings, we had the pick three lottos in the third state, 587 and 578. Now, on the day that Trump ended, okay, let me just make sure that it's quite, I'm going to go back to this prophecy once again really quickly here. Okay, so this calls for a mind of wisdom. The seven heads are seven mountains on which the woman is seated, and there are also seven kings, five of whom have fallen. One is, and the other has not yet come. Okay, so we have the seven kings, but the prophecy mentions five of whom have fallen. And then, as I said, it gets into a description of the eighth king that follows the seven kings. So it's the fifth through eighth king's prophecy. And the eighth king follows the seventh, as Obama, the eighth king, will follow the seventh king, Trump, because of the series of presidents that began in the year 77. When, at the inauguration, Paul Simon sang American Tune and about the Apollo 11 mission 9 days before Stephen King published his book, The Shining, as in Revelation 9:11, the description of King Apollyon. And when Paul Simon sang about the King's Mansion, Elvis Presley, the King's Mansion, the opening lyric in his famous song from his seventh studio album, titled Graceland, the name of the song also, is "The Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar," as in The Shining. Okay, so it was a little off there, but now so you understand now why it's the fifth through eighth king's prophecy at least. So let's continue. On the day that Trump ended the interview and said he had had enough, after arguing about the shoplifted referendum and accusing the interviewer of being corrupt, the Chicago Bulls player Stacey King died. All right? That's confirmation. This was 587 days, as in the seventh king in the fifth through eighth king's prophecy, after the shoplifted referendum. On the day that Trump argued and stormed out of the interview during a rainstorm, after the argument about the shoplifted referendum, that was the day that this basketball player, Stacey King, died. And he won the championship with the Chicago Bulls 3 times. Trump was in the 30th state. And on the day of Flight 587, the pick 3 lotto numbers were in the 3rd state. All right. And again, the pitcher on the pitching mound on that day pitched 7 innings, and then at the end of the 7th, pitched 7 pitches for the strikeouts to end the 7th inning. It was his 7th win of the season. The team scored 7 runs, etc., as I explained earlier. And pitchers on the pitching mound symbolize the Antichrist king on the Temple Mount, which is why Stacey King died on the same day as the pitcher sign on the Temple Mount. In the pitching mound. Now, Flight 587 in Queens was the 2nd deadliest in history after flight in U.S. history, after Flight 191 in Chicago. Okay, and again, the 587 days gets us to the death of the Chicago Bulls player named King. And this hints at King Apollyon in Revelation 9:11, because Flight 191 hints at 9/11. And it was furthermore, Flight 587 crashed in Queens, as in King Apollyon. And Flight 587, God uses records for signs. It was the 2nd deadliest, which hinted at the deadliest. When you mention this, for example, on Wikipedia, you reference what was the deadliest. So it was the 2nd deadliest after the other one. If it were the deadliest and not the 2nd deadliest, we would never get a reference to the other flight. That's why it was the 2nd deadliest and not the deadliest. Because Wikipedia wouldn't have mentioned the second. If the one in Chicago was the 2nd deadliest, it wouldn't be mentioned in context of Flight 587's crash. You see how it works, right? So God brought into all of this Chicago. Why? Because the basketball president is from Chicago, and hence the Chicago Bulls basketball player named King, and his death on the day that Trump, who is King Jehu in God's parallel, was in the 30th state, and 30 in the Bible symbolizes king. I forgot to write that down here. Or maybe I wrote it in the other paragraph that I read yesterday. But in this recording, it's in the same video. I just am doing this in 2 parts here. So yeah, Joseph and David were made kings at the age of 30 years old, and that's why 30 hints at king. That's why Trump, King Jehu, in God's parallel with the Bible, was in the 30th state on the day that King died. Also, Trump is a parallel with King Cyrus, described in Isaiah chapter 45, and that's why Trump was the 45th president. All right. Now, King Apollyon's representative, because King Apollyon is a name for Satan, his representative is the president from Chicago, who is the 6th king in the 5th through 8th king's prophecy, and was born in the year 61. The 58th prime number of people died in the deadliest aviation disaster that was Flight 191 in Chicago. Flight 587 crashed in Queens 61 days after 9/11. Right? So first of all, the fact that the number of people in the deadliest aviation disaster in history is the 58th prime number, 271, is a confirmation that it's connected to Flight 587, as in the 5th through 8th King's prophecy. Also, Revelation 9:11 mentions King Apollyon. So that's why another king reference here with Flight 191. and the 58th prime number. Both of the numbers here are references to kings in the book of Revelation. Because the president from Chicago is the Antichrist king, the representative of King Apollyon. Now, Obama was born in the year 61, and Flight 587 crashed in Queens 61 days after 9/11. But it was also 8 weeks and 5 days. Again, that's what I mentioned that yesterday in the other part of this video. That's, again, Flight 587. Or did I mention that yesterday? Or, okay. But anyway, this is amazing. This is amazing because it's now understood why. I didn't know this until today. We're talking about 25 years. And this now coming to light. Yes, of course. Through 9/11, God was pointing to the Antichrist, who was born in 61. That's why the plane crashed into Queens, which pointed to Trump, who's trumpeting the arrival of the Antichrist 61 days after 9/11. Now, there's more to this as I'm about to explain here. Or did I explain it yesterday? Maybe I explained it yesterday. Again, it was this interval is not just 61 days, it's 8 weeks and 5 days. And Obama moved to Chicago in 85. And again, Flight 587, 61 days after 9/11, pointed to the deadliest plane crash, which was in Chicago. Again, the Antichrist Obama will become the president again through a plane crash. And again, 9/11 pointed to Obama because the fourth hijacked plane, which, here we go, it's right here. In Revelation 9:11, King Apollyon rises out of the bottomless pit. On 9/11, 44 people died when the fourth hijacked plane crashed at a 40-degree angle into a 40-acre pit, or created a 40-acre pit, 40 plus 40 miles outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The 44th president is predicted to return to the White House at 4x400 Pennsylvania Avenue after a plane crash and the 61st presidential election. That's again why Flight 587 crashed 61 days, which is why Flight 587 crashed in Queens 61 days after 9/11. It's pointing to the 61st presidential election involving the man born in 61. In the year that Roger Maris broke the home run king's Babe Ruth home run record, when Roger Maris hit 61 home runs in the year 61. The rise of King Apollyon is described in the fifth trumpet, which is why Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon, which is a five-sided shape, on 9/11. Okay, again, the rise of King Apollyon in Revelation 9/11 is described in the fifth trumpet, which is why the flight crashed into the Pentagon 5 on 9/11. And it's the fifth out of 7 trumpets, and it was Flight 77. Now, trumpet is the 7th king in the parallel of presidents that began in 77. Flight 77, right? 7th king that began in the year 77. When Paul Simon sang at President Carter's inauguration about Apollo 11, about the Apollo 11 mission on the date 119, which hints at Revelation 9:11. Apollo 11, he sang about 9 days before Stephen King published The Shining. Right? 9 days after he sang about Apollo 11, hints at King Apollyon in Revelation 9:11. Or I should say, Stephen King published The Shining 9 days after Simon sang about Apollo 11, and Revelation 9:11 speaks of King Apollyon. The king died in 77. I'm talking about Elvis now. The king died in 77. And Simon's song about the king's white mansion, as in the White House mansion, which is what it hints at. And in that song, he opened with the lyric, quote, "The Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar," unquote, as in Stephen King's The Shining. Which is why on the day that the 7th king stormed out of the interview during a storm in the 30th state, 30 equals king, the pitcher for the 30th state's team pitched 7 innings after throwing 7 pitches to strike out the remaining batters for his 7th win when his team scored 7 runs. The name of the pitcher who shined is Mizorowski because this hints at the Mississippi Delta that was shining like a national guitar. Delta equals 4, the 4th letter in the Greek alphabet. 4 times Mizorowski went through the batting order of the team from the Four Corners state that has 4 corners. And in 4 recent starts, he pitched 7 innings, which was the same day that the 47th president trumpeted in the state that the pitcher pitches for. Obama is also the 8th king in the 5th through 8th king's prophecy. And this is why the pitcher threw 8 strikeouts in 7 innings on the day that the 7th king stormed out of the interview during a storm, 587 days after the shoplifted referendum. This 587 days connection that points to the Flight 587 plane crash is the reason why Mizorowski's 7-inning, 8-strikeout performance for his 7th win is 787 days before the predicted plane crash into a baseball stadium in Missouri. Mizorowski. Okay, so 7 innings, 8 strikeouts for his 7th win hints at 787 days from the game when he did 7 innings and 8 strikeouts for his 7th win before the predicted plane crash into a baseball stadium in Missouri, which is why his name is Mizorowski. That's an amazing thing right there. This one paragraph. This crashed past tense, that's a typo. Okay? If you don't believe me, here's the date, June 8th, 2026, okay? In case you're watching this after the plane crash. Of course, the date the video is posted proves everything also. But a smart person will recognize that obviously these paragraphs here could not have been concocted in the imagination of a human being, even if it were after the fact. Okay? That'd be silly isn't even the right word for concluding such a thing. But I understand the mindset of the agnostic atheist, and they are hardcore into their religion of agnostic atheism. every religion, worldview, every worldview is a religion, and every worldview and religion has a core belief. The core of that belief system. The core belief of the Christian worldview is that there is a personal being, God. The core belief of the pantheist, the Eastern religionist, is that God is an impersonal energy that is the universe itself, instead of a personal being that is holy, which is Hebrew, that means separate from the creation and not the creation itself. Okay? The core belief of the agnostic atheist is that there may or may not be a God, but it is impossible to know because there is no evidence, which is false. It's a lie. It is the biggest lie of all time. It's not even that believable, though. It's not even a believable lie. It's just nonsense. It's a fairy tale for adults. The creation itself is filled with all kinds of evidence, and that's just the book of life. The evidence goes way beyond that. This video here is another piece of evidence that the agnostic atheist will reject because of their hardcore core belief. All right. Now, so where was I now? The stadium that the 7x7th Vice President's plane will crash into will be Bush Stadium on a flight from Washington to Los Angeles. President W. Bush was president on 9/11 when Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon, as in 5, in Washington, as in W, after departing for Los Angeles. Okay, so the flights on 9/11, the Flight 77 on 9/11 departed from Washington and was on its way to Los Angeles, which is a parallel with the predicted crash of the 7x7th Vice President, hence Flight 77. Because her plane is predicted to be flying from Washington to Los Angeles, when it is predicted to be brought down by God and crash into Bush Stadium. Okay? But the W here and the Pentagon are hinting at the 5th president in the 5th through 8th King's prophecy, which is President Bush, who was president on 9/11. The 5th king, in other words, the beginning of this prophecy about the end times begins with the president who had just become president on 9/11. In other words, 9/11 was the warning of the beginning of the end times. Now, the destination of Los Angeles in these flights hints at fallen angels that are described in the 5th trumpet. Bush is the 5th king in the 5th through 8th King's prophecy. Pentagon, 5. On 9/11, as in Revelation 9/11, King Apollyon in the 5th trumpet. On 9/11, planes crashed into the World Trade Center. That's another W. Building 7's 47 floors collapsed. On this day, the 7th king and 47th president called into the local TV news station. That's a 747. Building 7, 47 floors, 7th king, 47th president. And again, as I explained earlier, Trump was a 9/11 sign when he called into the local TV news station. Flight 587 pointed to the 7th king from Queens, and Flight 587 that crashed into Queens pointed to the 7th king, who was born in Queens, and Flight 587 crashed on the same day that the third state's pick 3 lotto numbers were 587 and 578. This hinted at 3 sets of 7. Because the plane crash pointed to the 7th king. And the plane crashed on the day of the third state's pick 3 lotto numbers that were the same as the plane flight number. That gives us 3 and 7, which hints at 3 sets of 7, which is Trump. Because the Israelites enacted a symbolic 3 sets of 7 when they blew trumpets before the walls of security collapsed, which is why Trump called into Channel 9 News and mentioned his tower on Wall Street after the towers collapsed. 587 days after the stolen shoplifted referendum, the 7th king stormed out of the interview during a storm in the 30th state. That's also 3 sets of 7 and trumpets. With a margin of 77 electoral votes, the 7th king, Trump, defeated Queen Jezebel, Hillary, the wife of King Ahab, Bill Clinton, in the 58th presidential election, which hints at the 5th through 8th king's prophecy, and Flight 587 into Queens. All right, I mean that's amazing, right? That's another 587 for you. In other words, Flight 587 was pointing to the 58th presidential election that would be won by 77 electoral votes by the 7th king. That's 587. And again, it's all relevant because of the 5th through 8th king's prophecy in which Trump is the 7th king. Astounding once again. Another paragraph here. This one sentence here is so profound. Do you understand how important this video is? I'm revealing to you the secrets of 9/11 here. I hope it's appreciated. One last paragraph. The 58th election of the 5th king, Bush. Did I emphasize earlier that Bush is why Kamala Harris will crash into Bush Stadium? Because it all points to 9/11, when President Bush was the president during the plane crashes. Hence, her plane will crash into Bush Stadium. Now, the 54th election of the 5th king, Bush, was almost shoplifted by the left, because that's what they do. That's who they are. That's their nature. And they feel justified morally, ethically. They're morally superior, and by any means necessary is the communist way. And if they're not conscious of their communism, they are what Stalin called useful idiots, because it all leads to communism. It all leads to totalitarianism. And they are totalitarian. And so that's what they do. That's just their nature. They shoplift referendums. That's what Democrats do. It's who they are. They're not liberals. That's a term that's really outdated. All right. The 54th election was almost during the 5th king's, that was the election of the 5th king, Bush, was almost shoplifted. It was, in fact, that whole episode of the almost shoplifted referendum in 2000 was a warning from God about what was to come. It was a warning about what was coming. Shoplifted referendums. Shoplifted presidential elections, referendums. Now, let me just start again. The 54th election of the 5th king, Bush, was almost shoplifted, and the Jewish, as in Israel, as in the 5th through 8th kings. Well, I should say this parallel with King Ahab and King Jehu in the Bible. The Jewish senator and vice presidential candidate from the 5th state helped prevent this. If you recall, Joe Lieberman, who later became a hero, or afterwards was a hero, with conservatives for standing up for truth, he played a role in the prevention of the shoplifted referendum when he spoke the truth and conceded when others wouldn't, when other illiberal Democrats wouldn't, which is the majority of them back then. I mean, they're all illiberal now. But back then, we had people like Joe Lieberman. But it's not a coincidence that he was the first, and God uses firsts for signs, he was the first Jewish vice presidential candidate. Anyway, he was from the 5th state. And this led to the election of the 5th king, Bush. The election came down to the counting of the votes in the 9 plus 9 plus 9th state. The 59th presidential referendum was shoplifted exactly 999 weeks after 9/11. Like I said a minute ago, the whole almost shoplifted referendum in 2000 came down to the 9 plus 9 plus 9th state because in the first year of the 5th president, Bush, we had the events of 9/11, which were exactly 999 weeks before the shoplifted referendum, which also happens to end in the number 9. In fact, it's the 59th presidential election, and Bush was the 5th king, and Lieberman from the 5th state had a role in all of that. Now, from the shoplifted referendum, it was 99 weeks. That was the 59th presidential referendum. It was in turn another exact 99 weeks before the closest approach of Jupiter to Earth in 59 years, which confirmed the connection of 99 weeks to the 59th shoplifted referendum. And on that day, which by the way was September 26th, 2022, on that day, the NASA probe crashed into the double asteroid, the probe being named DART, double asteroid, something, something. And on that day also, the U.S. blew up the 2 Nord Stream pipelines. The double asteroid, the 2 Nord Stream pipeline explosions hinted at the 2 planes that struck the 2 towers on 9/11, 99 plus 999 weeks exactly earlier. All of that, by the way, serves to confirm the connection to the shoplifted referendum, the 59th presidential referendum, which is confirmed through the connection to the close approach of Jupiter, the king planet, in 59 years. Okay, now. So the 2 planes crashed into the twin towers, as in the double asteroid and the 2 Nord Stream pipelines. And if you didn't know that the U.S. bombed the pipelines, well, now you do. Because again, as I said at the beginning of this video, the purpose of it is to prove these controversial things. And if you were in the dark regarding that because you follow the mainstream propaganda from the left, now you know. This all came out by Seymour Hersh, the formerly revered journalist who has all of the inside connections, who broke Watergate, right? And other stories in the past. He broke this news, but when the news didn't fit the left Democrat Party narrative, he was all of a sudden a pariah in journalism. That's how evil and wicked the Democrats and the left are today. And Seymour Hersh was one of them. But they'll chew up their own and spit them out if they cross the narrative and the propaganda. Okay, so the fifth so the two planes crashed into the Twin Towers 99 plus 999 weeks earlier when the seventh king called into Channel 9 News. The 54th referendum that was almost shoplifted hints at 6 plus 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 6. Because God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning, that's why 666 is the number of the Antichrist. But here we have 3 sets of 666 with the number 54. And so again, the 54th almost shoplifted referendum was pointing to was ultimately pointing to the rise of the Antichrist. Also, 54 is 2 times 27, which hints at 227, which is the 7 times 7th prime number. And 22 divided by 7 is 3.14, the closest fraction that approximates pi. The 6th and 8th king, Barack Obama, which by the way equals 68 in simple English gematria, A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3, that's another confirmation that Barack Obama is the 6th and 8th king in the prophecy. Okay? The 6th and 8th king will become the president again after the 7 times 7th, as in the 7 times 7th prime number. Vice president is predicted to die in a fiery plane crash into Bush Stadium in the area code 314, as in 22 divided by 7. All this was hinted at, in other words, from the 54th election and 9/11. And this fiery plane crash into Bush Stadium in the area code 314 will point to the burning bush in Exodus 3:14. I'll just slow that down, which will point to the burning bush, the fiery plane crash into Bush Stadium in the area code 314 will be pointing to the burning bush in Exodus 3:14. The 7th king, Trump, ran for president with the Libertarian Party, as in Joe Lieberman, in the 54th presidential election. That was his symbolic arrival, Trump's symbolic arrival into national politics. 28 years later, he's predicted to die, which will be the end of his time in the national spotlight and national politics. And King Jehu in the Bible reigned for 28 years. 2000 to 2028 is 28 years. And so that's it. God bless. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, a Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, Nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, Jesus loves you, unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.